Hello everybody and welcome back to Permanent Waves. Today we're discussing Tarkus, the second record by progressive rock supergroup Emerson, Lake & Palmer, or ELP for short. Released in 1971, this is a very ambitious statement by the band that remains their definitive and most well-known work, and also marks the first appearance of the side-long epic with a song more than 20 minutes in length in progressive rock. There's a lot to discuss on this one, from the album name being a hybrid of Tartarus and Carcass, and to that lovely armadillo tank hybrid gracing the cover art. But first, here's a special preamble from Isaac.
The dust has settled along the winter night. Nothing bare to see, no fauna, no flora, nothing there. What do you know who you are? I don't know who I am. But there beyond the horizon you see the armadillo as it just creeps and creeps. You can't know if it's friend or foe, but you know that upon the site itself, it has seen many a battle. Perhaps this barren land is the result of it. Who knows?
Well, thanks, Isaac, for the tone-setting preamble there. So we are talking about Tarkus, Emerson, Lake & Palmer, ELP. They are one of the first supergroups in progressive rock history, 1971, with all members from prior successful bands. You have Greg Lake on bass, guitar, and vocals from King Crimson, Carl Palmer on drums from Atomic Rooster, and Keith Emerson on the keyboards and organs from The Nice. ELP are known for very ambitious pieces and lots of very complex instrumentation, doing a lot of classical two-rock renditions, throwing a lot of genres together, and honestly have a bit of a negative reputation for some critics who say you can't spell pretentious without ELP, because they're usually quite overblown, not really overblown, just really ambitious. So Tarkus itself, though, is their second record. It's composed of one side-long epic, the title track itself, and the other track has 5 supporting tracks that are a lot shorter in nature and have no relation to the title track whatsoever. And so now that moves us on to the record itself, Tarkus, which, as I alluded to a bit in the intro there, is a record of contrasts and comparisons. So we have a very distinctive armadillo tank image, which honestly is the reason I bought the thing, because I saw that cover and I went, oh hey, ELP. Bought it. And Isaac, if you want to take us away on your thoughts on the album and the sound.
Yeah, I also want to just quickly give a brief history with this between, if I may, between him and Johnny and I, where this was one of the, I guess I want to say a close one, but this one is kind of important to both of us, because I remember he, one of the first meetings we had with each other, he suggested this album to me, and I hadn't listened to it for quite a long time until I did it on my own, because I'm just I always had that in my mind of listen to Tarkus, listen to Tarkus. And I finally got around to listening, and oh boy was I excited. But this is one where he wanted us to kind of emulate them, because we had a pianist, we had a drummer, and we had a bassist, and that's pretty much the primary musicians of the band. So it's we could emulate, not 100%, but do our own thing with the instruments that we have.
Yeah, power trio, 70s style, 100%.
Exactly.
That would be fun, but anyway, life goes on.
A little bit. Life moves on. So yeah, this one, wow, very, very progressive this one was. I very much enjoyed it and realized why I love progressive rock, because that 20 minutes, oh man, it's like a journey, man. I really enjoyed that. It is.
It's a journey. Yeah. Do you know anything about the story with Tarkus or the symbolism or anything?
The behind the scenes, or the story itself? Both. Because I can, obviously, if you look at if you're looking at the CD, if you're looking at the record itself, or if you're on one of your streaming services, it'll say there's they have parts, and I figured that out as well, where they have one is Eruption, Stones of Years, Class, etc.
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. So it's interesting. Keith Emerson's style is very, very classically inspired, so he does divide the title track up into suites. It's beginning with Eruption anyways. So Tarkus itself, once again, that gorgeous artwork by William Neal. Have to call the artist out here for this excellent work. So lyrically it kind of tells one story, but the imagery on the record kind of tells another one. So the imagery on the record, and I showed you that screenshot of the whole sleeve I have, is the story of this creature on the cover, Tarkus, this armadillo tank hybrid, the story of its life. In terms of the artwork, we have Tarkus emerges, Eruption, birth, volcano, and then each preceding section is basically another creature it fights and kills. So our first one is this kind of spider machine hybrid. Tarkus's guns take it down no problem. Second one is, it looks like a pterodactyl jet hybrid thing. Once again, Tarkus destroys it. And then we have this like grasshopper with rocket launchers. Once again, Tarkus destroys it. But things get a little bit different when Tarkus comes up against a manticore. The manticore in this artwork being face of a man, body of a lion, tail of a scorpion, which Tarkus is actually defeated by the manticore, has his eye in the artwork, his eye slashed open. And then Tarkus afterwards goes into the sea, ending with the sweet Aqua Tarkus, presumably to die. However, lyrically, Keith Emerson has stated it's about the futility of war and about a revolution that ends in violence and failure. And the lyrics reflect more of this kind of cynicism and this overall kind of bleak outlook. Even Greg Lake's vocals I found to be quite kind of mournful and almost in really kind of a minor key, which is totally fine. And there's a lot of catchy melodies in here. I'm kind of surprised with how effective some of these melodies are vocally by themselves. Like, they actually hold up quite well. And yes, the instrumental playing on this record, particularly the title track, is absolutely insane. Like, there's a lot of complex time to church. You got a lot of 5/4, a lot of 10/8, and this was the intention. Emerson heard Carl Palmer playing some 5/4 grooves, and they matched perfectly with some of the keyboard lines he was composing, and that's how they came up with the really technical Eruption, Iconoclast, Mass. All those sections are just really complicated on keyboards. And Keith Emerson's actually known for having one hand on the piano and one hand on an organ, so he's actually both hands on a different instrument while he's playing half of this stuff. So the technicality of this music is just insane. Even Carl Palmer's drumming, as you, Isaac, as a drummer can attest to, is off the wall. After all the technicality, all the melody, is all the kind of cynicism, all the futility of conflict, all that kind of stuff, is almost sounds like a war march, and there's a mockery of a flute playing, but it sounds like it's underwater. And that was actually a joke by Emerson to mock the war march as mocking conflict in general and the futility of it all.
Yeah, with Tarkus, the track itself, do you think the lyrics match with the notes that are being played, or do you think the notes itself? If you could listen to this without the lyrics, do you think you could get a sense of the story of Tarkus, that what it's trying to say?
I think you probably could. In general, like there's a lot of turbulence with the emotional sections. They kind of, and one of the sections is straight up called Battlefield. A lot of them sound very turbulent, very angry, very fleeting, very frantic, and then the lyrics, they tend to give way to more calm passages with more dark messages. So it's almost like, the calm before the storm in a lot of senses with this track. I think you could. The interesting thing about this record, and it comes up a couple times, is that it's very interesting tonally. Like, yes, there is a lot of stuff on revolutions, death, a lot of darkness, but also a freaking armadillo tank on the cover, which is kind of, most people look at that cover. I don't think I've met a single person who's seen that cover and hasn't just kind of looked at it like, what the fuck is that? You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's a very, very interesting, I think that's what stands out to people, is that it's so kind of off the wall with all that imagery and all that weird animal tank hybrid stuff, but at the same time, it's really good music.
What if you took this, if you had somebody listen to the whole album before you showed them the armadillo tank or the cover itself, I wonder if they would picture this, or if they could put it to, if they would
make the connection.
Yes, thank you. Make the connection.
Yeah, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. It's very strange, even for progressive rock, which at the time was beginning to flourish. This actually predates Genesis' Supper's Ready and Yes is Close to the Edge and Rush's 2112, my favorite example of this style of record, where you have one song completely dominate this first half of the record, and then the second half is more secluded tracks by themselves. This actually predates a lot of those classic examples. This was a really groundbreaking record upon its release. So much so that even when Greg Lake saw what Emerson was writing with the 20-minute title suite, he wasn't really into it until he eventually agreed to pursue it, but it actually took him some convincing because it was just so kind of different. So unsurprisingly, critics hated this thing when it came out. I mean, progressive rock typically doesn't have a good reputation with critics at all, who kind of view it as pretentious, overblown, and just overindulgent. But in retrospect, it is one of the most loved progressive rock records of the 70s. And Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I didn't realize how popular they were. They're at over like 48 million albums sold worldwide, which you don't really see normally for bands that release 20-minute tracks. It's kind of cool. But in retrospect now, once again, there was actually, I had to go find it, but it's actually really cool. There was a PhD thesis written by Peter T. Ford that goes into insane detail on Emerson's composition style for the title track and the lyrics and all the themes he uses and all the time signatures and the music and all that. It's a cool read. It's long. Once again, PhD thesis. It's pretty, if you want a bit more intro on that title track, check that out. That's a really cool read. I had to look into it myself. I guess I would ask if you could leave a link for the listeners to go find that PhD thesis. Sure, that's a good idea. I will do that. Other than that, no, I definitely felt there was a lot of conflict. That's the one thing that I could through line throughout the entire track itself. It
maybe that's a little bit like broader, like easy to understand. But it's like, no, I felt like there was always either the point of view character or whatever the lyrics were referring to. It always felt like there was something the person was in conflict or conflicted.
Yes, so a lot of Emerson's writing on this reflects the futility of conflict and how it even leads to self-destruction, particularly in the mass section where there's a lot of individuals who make statements basically in the verses and then they're contradicted, and we end up seeing the consequences of their actions, and they're often bloody and relentless. And this is followed by the battlefield segment, and the first line of that is "Clear the battlefield and let me see," the spoils of our victory essentially. And all we have is wastelands, death, children orphaned, people crying. So it's very much an entire analysis by Emerson on the futility of war. This culminates in Aqua Tarkus, which is a mockery of the war march that concludes the track. But that pretty much wraps up side 1, so let's get on to the tracks on side 2. Side 2 is a bit less consistent than the title track because it contains a variety of ideas, and there's 5 different tracks here. We've got the Bitch's Crystal, which is like a furious howling blues track, which is really cool. We got Jeremy Bender, which is more of a song you'd hear played in a barroom brawl almost. You can just picture everyone sitting there with their drinks. There's even some hand claps at the end. Very enthusiastic track. We got almost hymns and nods to classical pieces, which ELP are known for, with The Only Way in Infinite Space. We have Time and Space, probably my favorite track on the second side, which is very kind of heavy Led Zeppelin-esque proto-metal, but done ELP style, which is very keys heavy. And at the very end, we have a joke track, which is Are You Ready, Eddie, which the group actually played kind of impromptu after finishing recording the record to celebrate. Eddie being their producer, of course. So that's quite a bit more lighthearted. So it's not a stretch to say, even just looking at the track list of this record, you can tell the focus is on Tarkus, the title track. And the side 2 is going to be a bit less consistent, which is, we'll get to that in a moment.
Wow, what a symphony of different sounds. I was not expecting, but it definitely does fit the description and the definition of progressive rock.
Certainly. There's a reason it's seen as a landmark record in the genre. So even just once again, looking at the track list and calling to mind 2112, like by Rush, which also has the symptom where the title track 2112 is friggin' fantastic, but the second side is a bit less consistent. I feel the same way with this one. So Tarkus itself, slaying as a prog epic. It's fantastic, ambitious, technically impressive, interesting lyrics, but the tonality is very strange, like going from Tarkus right into Jeremy Bender and Bitch's Crystal. It's kind of strange. To me, it was a bit abrupt, and I would agree the second side is definitely not as strong as the first, even though there's nothing wrong with anything on the second side. It's a little bit detached from the rest of the record. That being said, a lot of those songs are fantastic. The same amount of effort instrumentally put into Tarkus, like that same kind of heavy piano-driven, dark, technical, almost symphonic sound is just great. Love listening to it. A lot of fun. The record's a bit front heavy, but that's totally fine. It's still a great listen all the way through. If you like great piano playing, anything by Emerson is gonna kick ass on piano. That's just a fact. And that drumming, Isaac, what do you think?
Yeah, what can I say? It's definitely inspirational for me. It definitely something to strive to become. Which one was it? I forget. I know when I was. Pardon me if I'm going here, but listening to the lyrics of Jeremy Bender, I believe it was about a transgender woman. I think.
It's about a guy who cross-dresses.
Oh, okay. That was
Bender in English slang is someone who's either someone who's gay or someone who cross-dresses.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But yeah.
I thought that was what it was. And was it either The Only Way or Infinite Space, where either a confessional or somebody, like the point of view character or narrative is maybe in a church, because we have that epic, we have that organ going on, and then he's like the church and like I guess either angry or at least questioning God about like how come you didn't protect all those Jewish people in World War II.
Yeah,
it's like definitely hard hitting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was The Only Way. Infinite Space is a piano-driven instrumental.
That's what it was. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and that's what I mean. There's some really lyrically heavy subject matter on this record, and then there's like Jeremy Bender and Are You Ready, Eddie. That's a little bit really tonally inconsistent, which is like, it's not perfect.
Yeah, I see what you mean with this. Instead of being like a through line story, like I like to see sometimes with these albums, but I actually can accept this. This actually kind of feels like, again, differently, like different moods of like, okay, what am I getting from this album? It kind of reminds me of like a comic book almost, specifically like a comic book that has many different stories to it, many different tales. So you could have like a lighthearted one, you can have a dark, depressing one. So while people might, again, like I said, not agree with it just being, there should be a through line of like tone, this one I feel like, it just feels like a magazine or like a light comic book where you will get different artists or different story writers to come come in and give their speech or give their tale or whatnot, so they have a chance to like talk about what's on their mind or whatnot. So you have your fun stuff, then you have your really heavy stuff, and then you have just even more lighthearted fanfare at the end.
Yeah, and a lot of reviews I've read about this record retrospectively, or even at the time, consider a lot of the second side to be filler, like not as good as the title track, just straight up not good. I don't think that's fair at all. I do agree that if I'm going to listen to Tarkus and I have only time for one side of the record, I'm putting that title track on every single time. I would say it's probably Emerson, Lake and Palmer's definitive record. Like if you're going to get one record from these guys, probably check this one out. Although one of the follow-ups, Brain Salad Surgery, might be a little bit stronger overall as a record and also has a song longer than that one. It's Carnival 9 is actually 29 minutes in length, and it's about as insane instrumentally, if not more. But yeah, for anyone looking to listen to this record, if you can't find the vinyl, and Isaac, you'll probably notice on Tidal, there's like 3 different versions of this thing up there for whatever reason. One of them is the deluxe edition, and it has Steven Wilson's remaster in 2012 on it. And Steven Wilson, I've mentioned before on my talk on remasters, does excellent remasters of these progressive rock albums, and his remaster of Tarkus, like I heard things I didn't even know were there. The bass punched a lot more, the drums hit a lot harder. He did a really good job with the remaster on this, and if you only have access to streaming, be sure to look at Steven Wilson's mix. It's fantastic.
I agree. I was really listening hard. Maybe I didn't get as much as you did out of like hearing different things. I almost felt it sounded the exact same. Now I think about it, yeah, there were things that did sound different. I was like, okay, no, I feel like this is a little bit more crystal clear.
I think the mix definitely pops a lot more for sure on that remaster. But in any case, my closing thoughts, Tarkus is a fantastic example of really early progressive rock, like 1971. If you think the genre generally started in 69 with King Crimson, 2 years away, this is pretty great. Like this is a good place to start. You gotta love that armadillo tank on the cover. Great show of virtuosity with the keys and the drumming and exploring different time signatures. Yeah, it's probably pretty overindulgent for some people. Most of Emerson, Lake and Palmer kind of is. But if you're a prog fan or you want to get more into the genre, you can't go wrong with this one.
Yeah, definitely agree that this is an essential and definitely an introduction, not just to progressive rock, but also, I guess, to Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
And the sidelong epic. I will compare a lot of records that have a sidelong epic to 2112 because I'm a huge Rush fan, but this predates 2112 by 5 years, so I can't even say that. I'm comparing, if anything, Rush sound like this by comparison, which is always crazy to see. Like your favorite band who you consider it groundbreaking, just, someone did it before them. That's kind of crazy.
And I like that. I like where you're in your journey of music, you'll always think, these guys did it first. Nope, there's always somebody who was influenced by them.
Yes.
So that's just how bands are. Like nothing is like new. It's always like going back and looking at something else beforehand.
That's what makes it progressive, doesn't it? Implementing
exactly
the different elements into rock, and that's exactly what this is. And so for me as a progressive music fan, love it. Keep it coming. We got more of this stuff. Isaac, you got it. Some words to take us away here.
And so the armadillo tank plunged into the sea. Maybe it met Godzilla, maybe it didn't, but perhaps it devolved back into a microscopic organism. It devolved. But there's potential. There's potential for it, as Johnny has said. The seeds of it, or perhaps the life of it, continue on in other forms of organisms.
Wonderful. That was Tarkus, everybody. See you next time. Have a good night. Keep listening.